To Kill a Mockingbird. During his first 5 years in Maycomb, Atticus practiced economy more than anything. For several years thereafter, he invested his earnings in his brother's education. John Hale. John Hale Finch was 10 years younger than my father and chose to study medicine at a time when cotton was not worth growing. But after getting Uncle Jack started, Atticus derived a reasonable income from the law. He liked Maycomb. He was Maycomb County born and bred, and he knew his people. They knew him. And because of Simon Finch's industry, Atticus was related by blood or marriage to nearly every family in the town. Maycomb was an old town, but it was a tired old town when I first knew it. In rainy weather, the streets turned to red slops, grass grew on the sidewalks, and the courthouses sagged in the square. Somehow it was hotter then. A black dog suffered on a summery day, but bony mules hitched to Hoover carts flicked flies in the sweltering shades of the live oaks on the square. Men's stiff collars wilted by 9 in the morning. Ladies bathed before noon and after their 3 o'clock naps, and by nightfall were some soft tea cakes available for frosting of sweat and sweet talcum. People moved slowly then. They ambled across the square, shuffled in and out of stores around it, and took their time about everything. A day was 24 hours long, but seemed longer. There was no hurry, for there was nowhere to go, nothing to buy and no money to buy it with, nothing to see outside the boundaries of Maycomb County. But it was a time of vague optimism for some of the people. Maycomb County had recently been told that it had nothing to fear but fear itself. We lived on the main residential street in the town, Atticus, Jem, and I, plus Calpurnia, our cook. Jem and I found our father satisfactory. He played with us, read to us, and treated us with courteous detachment. Calpurnia was something else again. She was all angles and bones, and she was nearsighted. She squinted. Her head was wide and a bed slant and twice as hard. She was always ordering me out of the kitchen, asking me why I couldn't behave as well as Jem did when she knew he was older, and calling me home when I was ready to come home, and our battles were epic and one-sided. Calpurnia always won, mainly because Atticus was always taking her side. She had been with us ever since Jem was born, and I had felt her tyrannical presence as long as I could remember. Our mother died when I was 2, so I never felt her absence. She was a Graham from Montgomery. Atticus met her when we was first elected to the state legislature. He was middle-aged then, and she was 15 years his junior. Jem was the product of their first year of marriage. 4 years later, I was born, and 2 years later, our mother died from a sudden heart attack. They said it ran in her family. I did not miss her, but I think Jem did. He remembered her clearly, and sometimes in the middle of a game he would sigh at length, then go off and play by himself behind the car house. When he was like that, I knew better than him to bother. When I was almost 6 and Jem was nearly 10, our summertime boundaries, within calling distance of Calpurnia, were Mrs. Henry Lafayette Dubos's house, 2 doors to the north of us, and Radley Place 3 doors to the south. We were never tempted to break them, and the Radley place was inhabited by an unknown entity, the mere description of whom was enough to make us behave for days on end, and Mrs. Dubois was plain hell. That was the summer Dill came to us. Early one morning, as we were beginning our day's play in the backyard, Jem and I heard something next door in Mrs. Rachel Haverford's collard patch. We went to the wire fence to see if there was a puppy Mrs. Rachel's rat terrier was expecting. Instead, we found someone sitting, looking at us. Sitting down. He wasn't much higher than the collards. We stared at him until he spoke. "Hey." "Hey yourself," said Jem pleasantly. "I'm Charles Baker Harris," he said, "and I can read." "So what?" I said. I just thought you'd like to know I could read. You got anything needs reading, I can do it. How old are you? Asked Jem. 4.5? Going on 7. Shoot, no wonder then, said Jem, jerking his thumb at me. Scout's yonder been reading ever since she was born, and she ain't never started no school yet, and you look right puny for going on 7. I'm little, but I'm old, he said. Jem brushed his hair back to get a better look. Why don't you come on over, Charles Baker Harris? He said. Lord, what a name. It's not any funnier than yours. Aunt Rachel said your name's Jeremy Atticus Finch. Jem scowled. I'm big enough to fit mine, he said. Your name's longer than you are. Bet it's a foot longer than you are.
Like people on the moon, I see how things not